Hey everybody, what's up? What's going on? What's good? The Boxing Source checking in here, and this is the April 10th, 2022 edition of the Boxing Source Radio Show. That's right, we here, and we got a lot to talk about. Of course, I'm your host James Bell, the leader of the Boxing Source on social media. You could catch, boxing articles and more through the boxingsource.net or through our social media pages. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course through YouTube. You know, um, like I said, we got a good number of things that we're going to be talking about here in this particular episode. There was a lot of action that did happen on Saturday night, or pretty much Saturday during the day. We're trying to get through all of that as possible. um and it was a very, very good series of fights that happened over the course of the weekend. Of course, we had the events that happened in San Antonio, Texas, also over in Las Vegas, that we're going to be talking about, and hopefully we'll touch on what happened over in Japan a little bit here in this particular podcast, and then we're going to have a look ahead to the big event that's at the AT&T Stadium on April 16th. That's right. We're going to go into that a little bit more here. But want to start off with what went down over in Las Vegas. First, we're going to go through the main event. You had the interim WBC super welterweight title on the line as Erickson Lubin took on Sebastian Fundora. You had Erickson Lubin, of course. He was a former number one contender to the WBC super welterweight championship. And we know that he did lose to Jamel Charlo with the knockout, at the end of that first round. And he has been, working his way back up the ranks since. He pretty much had, a tough road to it. Had that, key win, against Jason Rosario last year over in Atlanta. That was Memorial Weekend, pretty much over in Atlanta. That fight was part of that Tank Davis versus Mario Barrios card there. But he was trying to get himself to get back in world title contention, and he was there, and he was slated to face Sebastian Fundora. Fundora, had a pretty good battle against Sergio Garcia a few months back. Some people thought that it was a very tough fight for Sebastian Fundora, that Sergio Garcia was able to, get in the inside and work Sebastian Fundora there, and some people actually thought that Fundora probably, should have been able to pull out the win there, or Sergio Garcia there. And ended up being the thing we want to it's basically these two guys are there. Of course, Fundora is there undefeated, and of course, like I said, there with Erickson Lubin, he had that one loss to Jamel Charlo. But with it being the interim WBC title bout, this is pretty much saying that this is the number one contender, pretty much the mandatory challenger for the WBC title, currently held by Jamel Charlo, who will be facing Brian Carlos Castaño once again for the undisputed title at 154 pounds. But let's get into this thing here with Lubin and Fundora. Man, listen, once that fight was announced, a lot of people were looking forward to it. I was looking forward to it. I was a fan, and going into this thing, I had, I had the thing where I was favoring Lubin, favoring Lubin there, but Of course, Fundora, who they call the Towering Inferno there, 6'6", pretty much around 6'7", uh, considerably taller as y'all know. And like I said, very active with his hands. He's pretty much like you know someone that has very active hands. Kind of reminds me a bit of Paul Williams back in the day. How he was throwing like 100 punches around and that type of stuff. Um, and that he was throwing punches in bunches. But in this particular fight, he showed something else here too that makes him, a real serious candidate for being a world champion later on down the line. But we'll get into that here in a bit as we go through the, pretty much like round by round type of stuff here. Pretty much like in the first round and stuff like that, you had a lot of action going down between these two fighters. And this is what we pretty much expected. Both have I think they kind of like cross paths in the amateurs. Was kind of like a friendly rivalry, so to speak, in the amateurs and whatnot. But both were around the Florida area coming up. We know about Lubin coming from the Orlando area. I think that Fundora was around the Hollywood, Florida area, or something like that. I have to, of course, confirm that. But uh, that both of these fighters were, extremely skilled boxers and also very good fighters. And we pretty much got action from the opening bell, activity from the opening bell. And of course, there was Sebastian Fundora. He was throwing those punches, man. He was throwing them a whole lot of punches. But one thing that, I didn't really expect there from Sebastian Fundora, with him being 6'6", around 6'7", is that he didn't necessarily, try to be someone who tried to control the distance. He wanted to come forward, throw punches, and then throw punches, while he's up close. That was the thing that got me, was that he threw a lot of body shots, a good number of uppercuts, which we'll get into here in a bit, but also, crosses and everything like that. It wasn't like, he threw like, the basic 1-2 combo, you know what I'm saying? There against Erickson Lubin. He was in there trying to get it, trying to get down, trying to get dirty, you know what I'm saying? And, he was doing that there in these opening rounds of the fight. And, you did have, Erickson Lubin that was game. But there was pretty much one thing from Erickson Lubin that I was looking for him to do that he wasn't doing. And that was, when he was trying to get to the inside, I thought he would have tried to move his head a little bit more or better. And he didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. He didn't do that at all, man. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. He didn't do that at all, man. And we got it to where it was pretty much in those first couple of rounds, it was almost like a war of attrition. Like who would be hurt, who would be hurt from these punches. Both of them throwing punches and punches. Both of them were landing shots upstairs. I thought that Erickson Lubin would have invested a little bit more to the body, but he didn't really do that. Number one, and then number two, I also thought that he would have tried to do something to tie up Sebastian Fundora, get him to not really be as active with his hands, and that didn't necessarily happen. And in round two, you had the action that just continued with the amount of punches that were being thrown by both fighters. And then, near the end of that second round, while they were up close, Sebastian Fundora threw a couple of shots. And then before they kind of like separated themselves, he landed a, right uppercut and bam, and Erickson Lubin went down to the canvas. It was like Sebastian Fundora pretty much was like, yeah, I got it. I got that shot. That's what I was looking for. I got that shot. And he scored that knockdown. Erickson Lubin got up, pretty much got to the ropes, collected himself on the ropes, there, before the end of that second round. And, that one to me was, kind of like pretty much kind of like showed, what we were going to be seeing here later on in the fight. Um, like I said before, it was like a war of attrition. You had both of these fighters having shots being landed on them a lot. There were a couple of times, before, the sixth round where Erickson Lubin was able to get himself a few shots in and whatnot. Um, but it wasn't, much to really like affect the overall momentum of Sebastian Fundora. And Fundora pretty much like got things to the point where, he backed Erickson Lubin to the ropes, was doing some work, doing some work here and there, as far as like you know, getting those uppercuts in, and those uppercuts were really doing damage there to Erickson Lubin. You know what I'm saying? They were able to do a lot of damage there to Erickson Lubin. Kind of like wore him down, over the course of the fight, to where you kind of like seeing Erickson Lubin being exhausted at times. And, to me, I know that Erickson Lubin had a good amount of work there with Kevin Cunningham to get himself prepared for this particular bout. But, I really didn't see that many adjustments there from Erickson Lubin over the course of this fight. And it wasn't until like, we got to that seventh round where, it was more of Erickson Lubin being able to catch Sebastian Fundora with the shot that affected Sebastian Fundora, kind of like messed up with this equilibrium, his stance, his posture, and Lubin was able to try to capitalize on that. Landed a couple of shots, and then Sebastian Fundora went down to one knee there in round seven, and kind of like collecting himself, got up, and then once he got up, he pretty much went back to work. It wasn't that, the momentum shifted over into Erickson Lubin's favor. It was more of like, Sebastian Fundora collecting himself and then getting right back into it in round eight. And then in round eight, more activity coming from Sebastian Fundora, not that much from Erickson Lubin. It was more of like Lubin just having his hands up, but still having those shots being landed, especially the uppercut. The uppercut was landing a whole lot of times. And then, after, round nine, it was pretty much to the point where, Kevin Cunningham, the trainer of Erickson Lubin, requested for Russell Moore to stop the bout after 9 rounds. And so it was a ninth round stoppage victory for Sebastian Fundora. He moves to 19-0-1, and it is the second loss for Erickson Lubin. We'll get into this a little bit more. I want to get in one guest here, checking in from, I think it's DC area. It's someone I think that did favor Sebastian Fundora. Uh, check it in, man. It's world ranked in the building, man. Yo, world ranked, man. What's happening, man? Yo, world ranked there. You in the building? I think, yeah, I think he had, well, it looks like he had some issues checking in there. Like I was saying, man, you had Sebastian Fundora. He is now the interim WBC Super Welterweight champion. And, one thing that, we kind of like told Jim Gray after this fight was, him, collecting himself and, trying to get his composure back after, that knockdown was scored by Erickson Lubin, and I think that, that kind of showed the amount of experience and the amount of wherewithal that he had there at that particular moment, to where, like I said, the momentum wouldn't shift back into the favor of Erickson Lubin. So I thought that was pretty key right there for him to like say, "Hey, all right, he was able to catch me, but that's part of the game. Sometimes that happens. It's not like, I'm perfect or anything like that, but let me just give myself, calm myself down and then just get right back into work. And that's what he pretty much did. Let me see here, trying to see if we got World Rank back in here. Checking in. World Rank, you get in?
Yeah, man. Mr. Who You Pick gonna have to add another synonym. They call it Mr. Boost Mobile because every time I get on here, I always have audio problems. So, what's going on, fam?
Oh man, I'm all good, bro. I'm all good. What's going on with you, man?
Good, man. Just checking in. See, I know you was talking about a little bit as I got on and off about the Fundora Lubin fight. So, um, it was. I mean, it was a good fight, exciting fight. From one of the top divisions in boxing, 154. Um, this fight doesn't really tell me it. Uh, I don't want to say it exceeded my expectations. It didn't really tell me anything different from either fighter. I think one thing that it did show me is Lubin. Um, he was tested, man. He had heart, man, and he came back against a hard opponent to even get inside and try to make it a fight. And he did that. He hurt Fundora several times, but Fundora's just too big of a puzzle for Lubin to get past, and his face was just a mess, man. And credit to both guys, but definitely credit to Lubin for staying in there as long as he did, because it's a hard way to go.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those fights. Like I said, I was looking forward to it, and it lived up to the expectations, man. Well, actually, man, I don't know, man. I thought it might have, exceeded some expectations and something like that. I think some people are, kind of like seeing it as like a fight of the year candidate, with the amount of action that happened, over the course of the fight. Both fighters being knocked down in the fight. And the thing there with Fundora, like I was saying, man, I mean, I knew that he had the offense, but the amount of toughness that he had in this particular fight, where he took a lot of shots from Erickson Lubin, and there were like a lot of clean shots too, and he was still, up for a good amount of that time, and until that, of course, that seventh round. But like I said earlier, he was able to compose himself in order for him to, get right back into the fight, or pretty much right after the knockdown. So there was that. You know what I mean? Want to add in another guest here, checking in real quick from the ATL area. Looks like the boxing academic is in the building. What's happening? See, the boxing academic is in here. Well, looks like he might be doing something there. I don't know. He might be eating food or something. But he'll check in when the time comes. I don't know, man. Maybe it's maybe he's having the same issues as you, World Rank.
Mine's a little more consistent than his, man. He's a consistent guy. He might just be doing something at the time. Mine's is definitely boost mobile situation. But in terms of I don't, Lubin took a hell of a beating, um, and what I tweeted earlier before the fight was that if Lubin became champion or got past Fundora, he would have earned his stripes going through the gauntlet of fighters that he's gone through. And like I said earlier, 154 is crazy deep, and for Lubin to go out like this, it's going to be difficult in terms of how can he get back to where he was before this fight. It's going to be a tough road because there's a lot of guys in line, and like I said, he took a good beating, and I heard that he broke his nose and separated his shoulder. Yeah, so it's a tough way to go, and I hope he bounced back from this. But I hope people start to put respect on Fundora's name now, because this shows that it's going to be a tough way for people. It's going to have to, a tough guy who's going to have a good chin and might have to have some size to him to be able to top him, because 6'5" at 154, that type of size isn't no joke.
Yeah, I was saying, he like reminded me of like a Paul Williams, when Paul Williams was there at 147 and 154, with him being tall, lanky, very active with his hands and that type of stuff there. And you're right. I think it's going to take someone that it would either be somebody that really has some serious pop behind their punch, or could pretty much like try to time what Fundora is doing and try to counter off that. Um, but like I said, I mean, some of the, like, as far as like the overall contenders are concerned, of course, we got, the two champions currently right now, Jermell Charlo and Brian Carlos Castano. But you talk about the, other guys that are top contenders for those belts, like, a Tim Zoo, and others, like he's probably the top rated guy, under that. I know that we had like another fight there at 154 that involved a former champion that I'll get into in a little bit. But right now, Sebastian Fundora's stock, I think more people will buy into his stock there, as far as like what he could do at 154 pounds. And going back to Erickson Lubin, yeah, I mean he had to work his way back up to this particular point, and to me, outside of Jermell Charlo, Erickson Lubin probably has the best resume out there in 154 pounds, up to that point. The guys that, he faced to, try to get himself back into it, guys like that, that fight I mentioned earlier with Jason Rosario, was one. He fought Terrell Garcia, Nate Gallimore, Ishe Smith, in order for him to get back into it. But we just ran into someone that just felt like he couldn't be stopped or couldn't be denied there in Sebastian Fundora. And one thing that I was kind of like worried about here with Erickson Lubin, like if he wasn't able to really get to the inside and work Sebastian Fundora up, or try to tie him up, work the body and that type of thing, that it could have ended up to the point where it would have been similar to Fundora's fight against Nathaniel Gallimore, where I mean, just Fundora was just throwing a whole bunch of punches and just ended up, stopping him. It was almost to that point where, he just, beat Gallimore up. And here it just, like I said, it beat Erickson Lubin up, to the point where Kevin Cunningham said, hey, I'm not going to, let you go out there to, get any more punishment. And, the thing about that was, I kind of found that interesting that, once they had the fight stopped, there was some ice that was thrown in the ring. And apparently that ice could have been thrown by members of Erickson Lubin's family, which, I mean, I hope that's not the case, but I mean, man, that's crazy, given that Kevin Cunningham, invests a lot into his fighter and has a, great relationship with Erickson Lubin, that, he wants to protect Erickson Lubin, not just for that particular fight, but for the future as well.
Absolutely. And one thing that I'm curious about now going forward, will he become, will his career come parallel to Julian Williams, where you get them nasty defeats, and this is Lubin's, even though this is not a KO, this is his second stoppage loss, technically.
Right.
So and this was a more physical, obviously, punishment than the first loss to Charlo. How does he mentally come back? We're still questioning that about Julian Williams, and he hasn't fully came back. He had a fight that he didn't look well in.
Right.
So how will Lubin respond to this? That's another thing, and just to see how he responds to it from the mental stage and the physical stage. Because from what I see, I don't know if J-Rock will ever reach where he was before his defeat. So it's just curious. Those type of beatings are, do take their toll.
Yeah, I mean, you had the thing with like I said, J-Rock. J-Rock was former unified champion. He had that big win over Jared Hurd, you know, and after that particular fight, he goes up against Jason Rosario, in his hometown, and he gets, beat up and stopped. And, that was like, the second time that he had got stopped. And then me pretty much like soon after that there was like some back and forth between him and his trainer there at the time, Stephen Bradman Edwards. And they had like a little bit of a split, and then kind of like mended fences to a certain extent. And then we had his bout against Vladimir Hernandez last October. And in that particular fight, it kind of like looked the same way, where he kind of like had those moments where he, got hit a lot, and that's something that kind of like it kind of like sticks with you at a certain point when you seen that you were getting, beat up by, in this case with Julian Williams, he got beat up by Jason Rosario, and you seen like he was, so open to like those uppercuts and that type of thing, really hadn't, adjusted to that. And so when he ended up suffering a second consecutive loss there with that decision loss to Hernandez, then that kind of like stops his overall momentum too. And we don't really know where he's going to be at this particular point of his career, whether it's there at 154 pounds or if he wants to do anything else at this current juncture. I mean, I might have to hit up my guy out in Philly to see if he, got any more information on that. But yeah, like J-Rock Williams is there around that same spot is where Erickson Lubin is at this point, where they got to a certain peak and then after losing, and now they're almost at the level where it's like, can they really contend for a world title? At this particular point here in the 154-pound division. Given that 154 pounds is, like to me, it's like the deepest division, maybe in all of boxing. We got like eight or nine or 10 fighters that we can name that either held the world title or are serious contenders for a world title or fought for a world title.
Yeah, that top 10, you stack those names up, top 12, probably 14, top 10. Basically, you stack those names up with any other division, it's damn good, especially at the top. And another fighter, and I know you probably going to talk about him later, that had, not as devastating a loss, but he was able to bounce back, and that's Tony Harrison. So, he had a crushing loss to Charlo, and, again, that's another fighter at 154 that you're questioning, how does he come back? For Tony, he actually he made his case last night that he's at least not lost the step in terms of after a key KO loss. So some people come back from these defeats and they're able to bounce back, and then there's some that are never the same. So it's to be seen with Lubin.
Right. Yeah, it's to be seen with Lubin, and we got to see like where he's going to be at this particular point. But because, like I said, I mean, he might be, there at that same level of where, a guy that I think, he defeated Terrell Garcia. Terrell Garcia, had his fight against Tim Tszyu, and lost to Tim Tszyu, and had, of course, those other losses to, Erislandy Lara years back. And other things to where, of course, like, they're there 154 pounds, but like, what else can they do in order for them to angle to get back into world title contention? But you did, mention, another fighter that was part of that card in Tony Harrison, former world champion Tony Harrison. He did have that win over Jermell Charlo in 2018, handed Jermell Charlo his first loss. Then, that rematch where, man, I really thought that he kind of like fought a great fight in that rematch, but just got caught in the first knockdown. He got caught, and then the second knockdown he got caught again, and he just pretty much had one of those moments where he just slipped up, and sometimes that's all it takes in boxing, for you to either have a win or have a loss, and that type of stuff. So, but even in that rematch, a couple of judges had Jamel Charlo in the lead. I don't know about that, but still, Jamel Charlo had gotten the knockout win in the 11th round, and then took a while for Tony Harrison to get back in the ring. He fought against Brian Perella. That ended up being a split draw. He didn't really look all too well in that particular fight, and Perella probably could have been able to pull out the win, but they just didn't give it to Perella in that instance. But Tony Harrison got back into it against Sergio Garcia, who gave Sebastian Fundora a real fight, in his last fight, and that ended up being Sergio Garcia's first loss of his professional career. We had a good amount of fights, there that were over in Spain and stuff, but he went in there against Sebastian Fundora, gave Fundora some fits, and then he just had to see what he was going to do here against Tony Harrison. But you had two different styles that you're dealing with, comparing Sebastian Fundora and Tony Harrison. And Tony Harrison in this particular fight, man, I think that his performance against Sergio Garcia could have been the performance of the night, but there was another fight that where I was just very impressed by another fighter in another fight card that I'll get into later. But like Tony Harrison was just very comfortable there against Sergio Garcia. Sergio Garcia was just coming forward, but he wasn't, throwing that many punches coming forward, and whatever he was throwing, like Tony Harrison could see them joints coming. He was throwing very sharp jabs, very sharp counter shots. I mean, it almost, looked like like to me, it was almost like a masterful performance from Tony Harrison. And went through those 10 rounds, and he almost scored a shutout in all three cards. Only one judge gave Sergio Garcia 2 rounds, but it just looked like Tony Harrison was back, like he was comfortable. I know that he dealt with a lot over the past year or so. So he's trying to get himself back into it, and show that he is one of those guys to really look at there in the 154-pound division. And with him having that unanimous decision win over Sergio Garcia, he has now the 29th win of his professional career, and the former WBC super welterweight champion. I really like to see what's going to be next for him, but we got to see how that undisputed super welterweight title fight goes, because depending on who wins that kind of like determines what happens in the rest of the division. They're at 154 pounds. But yeah, Tony Harrison just looked very, very, very good in that particular fight there, man. World Rank, what you got on it?
Yeah, man, I agree 100%, man. He came back from that Charlo defeat and that Perella fight. I didn't see the Perella fight, so I can't judge it. I heard it was a close fight, or most people thought Perella won. But Harrison looked good last night, and it's he can do a lot of good stuff. He can fight on his back foot, which he did most of yesterday. He can fight on, he can be a dog on the inside like he was in the Charlo fight. To me it feels like he's still missing something. I don't know if it's still maybe the chin aspect of it, but the offensive stuff is there. The talent has always been there. Maybe some of the outside of the ring stuff, that his mental, sometimes he's not in every fight mentally. But as a person, I dig him as a fighter and as a person. Like you said, it's a log jam at 54. With the undisputed fight, with Fundora, with Zoo, with Harrison, and so many guys, and it's like, it's a long climb, not necessarily for him, but just for anybody to try to wait around and get the shot. And it's so many mix and match guys in PBC. His next fight might be another tough one. So, but he definitely has the tools and the skills to mix it up with anybody in the division, as we saw in the Charlo fight.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, he's somebody that could, potentially beat anybody in the super welterweight division. I mean, like I said, he does have that win over Jamel Charlo. And you kind of like look at the other guys that are there, like the Tim Zoos, the what is it, the Kurbanovs. I was supposed to mention Backroom Murders Aliev, who kind of like was part of that card for Tim Zoo versus Terrell Garcia that scored a win. He's still there unbeaten, but that's somebody to look into. I mean, he's got to be there next. After the thing with Sebastian Fundora. Like I said, I mean, you had pretty much a round robin of sorts. Like one person that said on Twitter there, Lefty said it's like a round robin of sorts. Like you got Charlo versus Castano. And I'm looking at this thing. I'm looking at the WBC rankings right now, and I mentioned the thing there with Charlo versus Castano. We had Erickson Lubin versus Sebastian Fundora for the interim WBC title. The next person that's ranked there is Tim Zoo, who's the top ranked guy in the WBO rankings. And you just had Tony Harrison versus Sergio Garcia. Those guys were 4 and 5. You know, um, and that just tells you like that's about 8 or 9 guys that I mentioned there in the 154-pound division that have basically fought each other. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't see how like there's more interest from a boxing fan's perspective at the 154-pound division, because in a lot of ways, like boxing fans, they'll complain because they say, "Oh, the top guys don't fight each other. This don't happen, that don't happen, or whatever it is." But on some rare occasions, you actually see that happening. And here in the 154-pound division, it's been like that for like the past few years or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm gonna give credit to PBC, not only for the 154 division, but 122. They're doing that kind of as well at 122. Not as prevalent, but they're still doing it at 122 as well. So they're getting their guys to fight each other, and of course it's a great thing because we got so. If you look at the landscape for even the last 5 years, we've had so many good fights in that division. At 154, that these guys, you can mix and match them. And another thing is, I'm not sure of the Charlo and Castanio, the winner. I'm not sure that they're gonna hold all those belts.
Right.
I don't want to say I'm confident, but I'm pretty confident that somehow these belts are gonna get fragmented up because there's too many guys on the list. It just seemed like all these guys can't sit here and just wait for unifications to keep happening, or one guy, whoever wins, to keep defending all field belts. Somebody's going to step in. One of these section bodies is going to step in and strip one of these guys. That's going to give some of these guys an opportunity. But yeah, this is 154 has been doing this thing for the last 5 years, 5+ years, with all these guys mixing and matching. And I don't know why it's not getting the attention that it should. Maybe it's a PBC thing or some other matter.
Might be a PVC thing. All right, we're gonna try here once again. Looks like he's gonna have another attempt here. The boxing academic is in the building.
What's going on, guys? I'm driving, so I may be have intermittent internet. So bear with me.
Got you. So we talked about the 2 fights that happened in Las Vegas, or the co-feature bout and the main event. Of course, Sebastian Fundora scoring that win over Erickson Lubin, and you had Tony Superbad Harrison with the unanimous decision win, near shutout victory over Sergio Garcia. So we're talking about the landscape of the 154-pound division and how those two fights, kind of like shaped the 154-pound division here in 2022. So what did you think about those fights there, Boxing Academic?
So I went away for a second. So definitely Lubin and Fundora, and what was the other one?
Harrison Garcia.
Oh, okay. Well, Harrison Garcia obviously is the easiest to speak on. The tale of two classes, you can definitely tell Garcia started late, and while he's definitely skillful in his own right, I don't know if what's his name went to the Olympics, but I'm just gonna make an analogy that the guys who typically go to the Olympics, when you compare them against the other guys who just like really good and fight, I would imagine that those, at least the fights I've seen, the guys who went to the Olympics, like you can tell the class difference, and you can tell that they fought a lot of styles and are at least comfortable with tackling, those million styles or whatever. So I can't say Tony Harrison went to the Olympics, but what I can say, you can tell Tony Harrison was a skill level above Garcia, and he pretty much just showed it. He showed that he was much more skillful than him, and it was nothing that Garcia could do. Simple as that. And I think, Tony Harrison was, did the same 2-3 moves and was feeling himself and was like, this guy ain't got nothing for me. You know how he talk. Tony Harrison, a funny dude. I will give him that. I do like his personality though. He's silly. You know what I'm saying? Like you can tell he'll be a good dude to hang around and just joke and laugh and, don't take himself serious.
Yeah, man. That those fights we was talking about Jim Gray, man. Yeah, I was laughing when he was talking, man.
Yep. But the Fundora fight, it was what I said it was. I didn't think that what I saw Lubin do, I didn't think Lubin had enough firepower, enough. I hadn't seen Lubin dig and find that inner whatever enough to what he would have needed to beat Fundora. And so that's pretty much what we saw. We saw Fundora, who didn't really get his range until maybe like round 2, 3. And then once he found his range, which was, let me put my shoulder on his head and throw uppercuts, it was, wasn't much that Lubin could do. And then, Lubin obviously needed, the way for him to win was going to have to be through his endurance. And once them first 3 rounds went, it was like, oh my, am I going to be able to keep up with this? Doesn't look like it. Uppercut, 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 uppercut. But I will have to give Lubin a lot of credit because in whatever round, we all saw the writing on the wall. And I could literally see Lubin thinking to himself, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to get his one last hurrah. And Lubin started throwing straight punches. He started throwing straight punches, started throwing, a 5-6 punch combo. And in that last hurrah, in that last exchange where he was like, I'm going to give my all in this last exchange, it worked out for him. He landed 4 shots or so. He hurt Fundora and he knocked Fundora down. And so I just got to give Lubin credit in that when he was backed up against the wall, he pretty much was like, hey, I'm probably going to lose this, but I'm going to at least go for it. And it paid off. And then once that was over and he didn't get him out of there, we all knew what time it was. I think that if that was his family who actually threw the ice, they are a bit unrealistic in that thinking that Kevin Cunningham didn't save his fighter and their family member, because it would have gotten a lot worse. Like, it was already worse. It would have gotten a lot worse. Like, what's the name ain't got enough power to, like, knock somebody out with one shot like Deontay Wilder, but he does have enough power to, like, concuss this man and make his brain shake all over the place when he already dehydrated. Did you see that dude's eyes? He was already dehydrated. Like, it was like, I'm just glad they stopped it. They could have stopped it before that. Lubin, like, Lubin is at a certain level to where he ain't gonna peak past. I think that, yeah, that was a bad matchup. Like, I don't know if I would have took that fight if I was him. Just knowing what I thought about it and Fundora and what his strengths are, and that it's his win. Yeah, that's just. Yeah, I don't think he should have took it. Just my thoughts.
I mean, the thing about it was with Erickson Lubin, he was working his way back up to, trying to be a top contender for one of those world titles. And, my thing is that he had that was pretty much like his only route. Because I'm looking at all these rankings out here for 154 pounds in those different sanctioning bodies, and I only see him in the WBC and the WBO. So it's like either he would have tried to get in on the WBC or try to go after a couple of fighters there in the WBO rankings. And that Tim Tszyu had just got himself involved with the Premier Boxing Champions, so that he could try to get on the inside of getting a world title shot probably sometime this year, maybe, depending on what happens in May. But with Erickson Lubin, it was like we had the fight against Jason Rosario, and then you had Fundora against Sergio Garcia, which was a semi-eliminator or one of those WBC eliminators that they have. And I think the fight that that Lubin had with Jason Rosario was like an eliminator too. So if you pretty much like had that, then yeah, you're gonna have to eventually face Sebastian Fundora, because Lubin had a version of a world title, one of those 55 minor world titles that these sanctioning bodies have. That's what Erickson Lubin had, and Erickson Lubin had that, and then he goes up against Fundora, and then that's going to be for an interim title because of the way that the world title thing works, like World Rank was mentioning. Was that these unification bouts pretty much delay these mandatories from happening. And so when they had that first bout between Jermell Charlo and Brian Carlos Castaño, they thought that, hey, there would have been a undisputed champion, but nope, they said it was a draw. And with it being a draw, that kind of delayed things. Tried to have a rematch last year, didn't happen. We have reasons for that. So now it's finally, happening after another delay, because it was supposed to happen last month. But it's finally happening in May, and hopefully we get a decisive winner for that to see who's the undisputed champion. And then after that, we'll see what happens with those titles. But like World Rank said, I think, those sanction bodies will be like, hey, we got this mandatory challenger right here, and you haven't defended your mandatory in about 16 or 18 months. So you're gonna have to come up and do something. If you don't do something, then we're gonna have to, get that belt. So that's pretty much gonna be the situation soon after the fights that happen. And I think it's going to be May 14th, that fight between Jermell Charlo and Brian Carlos Castaño.
I wanted to make a point about if Charlo won that fight, is there really any reason for him to stick around at 54?
Nope.
Like if he unifies the division, I don't think there's really no reason for him to stick around the division. And the other point I wanted to make, when people watch Fundora, it's one of those things where people be like, man, he tall as shit, but we can get to his body. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of length right there. We can get to him. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He looked unstable on his feet. But then when you get inside, you get in the ring with him and you see that length, and you can see that he's a decent fighter on the inside. It's like, damn, it's a whole different dimension than what people, see from the outside. It's like, he's a slim guy. He don't really look like, he's really got too coordinated. But once you get in there with him and you see that he's throwing uppercuts from the inside, and, he has range, even though he doesn't use it as much. He's just an effective fighter on the inside. So, people with smaller sizes, they'll tell their guy to try to get on the inside, but this guy's a damn good fighter on the inside. So that that kind of nullifies some of the advantage that you try to have as a smaller fighter.
Yep. Yeah, it's like once you get closer to Sebastian Fundora, that's when he's more dangerous. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, when he gets something like that, it's almost like dealing with I don't know, like a Tyson Fury or something like that. when you go, and face someone like Sebastian Fundora, who kind of like welcomes, fighting on the inside. Once he gets those uppercuts going and that type of stuff, that makes him, more of a dangerous fighter. And yeah, he'll be a real dangerous matchup for anybody there at 154 pounds. But I mean, I'd like to, see if he doesn't get in there for a world title shot next, that maybe he'll get in there against Tony Harrison. That would be a good or very interesting matchup to see what happens there if, Tony Harrison, with his movements, with the way that he kind of like approaches his opponents, if he'll be able to give Sebastian Fundora fits. But if not, then he might, end up getting caught like he did against Jamel Charlo or against Jared Hurd. So that might be another potential matchup down the line if Sebastian Fundora is not the next guy in line to fight for a world title. Because, like we said, with that undisputed super welterweight title fight coming up in May, we got to see if the winner ends up staying in the division or if those belts get split up. But, given, what people have said in reference to Jamel Charlo, him potentially moving up, and then on the other side with Brian Castano, some people say that he's having trouble making weight. Yeah, I don't know if either one of them is going to be able to keep those titles or whether to keep those titles after this particular fight. You know what I'm saying? So that, kind of like breaks down that main event in the co-feature bout. You also had Kevin Zumbrano against Brian Perella in that opener there for the Showtime telecast. I thought Brian Perella did a very good job there against Kevin Zumbrano. He was working the jab very well, especially in the first half of the fight. He did kind of like tire down a little bit in the second half to get Zumbrano back into it, but ended up having the judges have a draw in that particular fight. But I just felt like Brian Perella pulled that out, and I mean that's another tough break for him. That's the second consecutive draw that he's had in his professional career, and he is in the past 4 fights he's had 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 draws. And even with that 1 loss, that was like one of those last second bouts where he ended up losing to Abel Ramos at the very last second of the 10th round. Man, that that was a very, very tough break for him. But and according to the scorecards, he was winning that fight. So if he was able to get through that last round, he would have won that fight, and who knows where he would have been at that particular point of his career. So I mean, it's been, I know they nickname him Good Fella Perella, but I guess things hadn't been really good there for Brian Perella in his recent bouts. Now going into the card that was over in San Antonio, headlined by the return of the king, as they said. Ryan Garcia coming in there 21-0, going up against Emmanuel Tagoe. Emmanuel Tagoe had a record of 32 wins and 1 loss. Tagoe has been in the camp with unified lightweight champion George Kambosos Jr. part of that same group or the same clan with Peter Khan. Peter Khan was there in attendance with Emmanuel Tego. And we pretty much wanted to see where Ryan Garcia was at this particular point in his career. Of course, he had that win over Luke Campbell over a year ago. He was supposed to be in a couple of fights last year, but they didn't happen. He claimed that he was going through some tough times, some depression, so he had to go through that, get through that, and now he was able to get back in the ring. And Ryan Garcia did kind of look okay in the first couple of rounds. He did score a knockdown on Tego in the second round. He showed those flashes of speed that makes him probably one of the fastest fighters out there, particularly in the lightweight division. But also, there are a couple more things that he, had to work on. This was his first fight under the tutelage of, Goosen, after leaving the Canelo team and everything like that. And so, we got to see like how he's going to be able to look. But he went through 12 rounds against Emmanuel Tego. Tego was just a very awkward, very tough fighter. Someone that, made it like tough for Ryan Garcia to kind of like cut off the ring and try to land some, good punches in, you know what I'm saying? But it ended up being a unanimous decision win there for Ryan Garcia. And, I just think that it's something to where he does have a few things that he probably has to work on. And I think there with Goosen, he'll be able to try to, develop that a little bit more. I think, him leaving Eddie Reynoso was a thing about, Reynoso just having so many fighters under his, his camp. It's not Canelo Alvarez, it's Andy Ruiz, it's Oscar Valdez, it's Frank Sanchez Farre, it's a few others. And you've had instances where other fighters that were under Eddie Reynoso have left Eddie Reynoso because of the amount of fighters that he takes on. So I think Ryan Garcia was just saying, hey man, I need to, in order to develop more as a fighter, I need to, go ahead and have somebody that would really focus on, having time with me and just developing what I have and trying to sharpen up what I have and also add in a couple more elements. But I think he still has that amount of following and popularity where he would really get a lot of interest as far as like future fights are concerned. But I think that he will have one or two more fights. They're saying maybe two fights for Ryan Garcia here in 2022. But Oscar De La Hoya did kind of like mention before this fight that he still is trying to see about having Ryan Garcia facing Gervonta Tank Davis probably in 2023, which could be one of the bigger or more popular pay-per-view fights that we may have in a while. But either way, Ryan Garcia gets this win. And we just got to see what's going to be next out for him. I think it should be the guy that I thought that Ryan Garcia was going to face on Saturday, and that's Jojo Diaz. If people that watch live on the zone, Jojo Diaz was commentating, and he just seemed like he was hating. So he was like, man, I'm not that impressed. I see a couple of things here that he was doing wrong, and he doesn't look all too impressive. So I don't know. Maybe they're gonna try to build that up and say a Ryan Garcia versus Jojo Diaz sometime later this year. If Garcia wants to get right back in the ring. So, any thoughts about Ryan Garcia's performance there against Tego from anybody out there?
Yeah. So the performance, I mean, Garcia was in there with somebody who, after about like the first 2 rounds, Garcia landed some shots, and Tego was like, man, I'm not about this life. And it just seemed like, I don't want to say he was running, because I don't think he was running, because he was a little crafty, but he wasn't in there to try to win, man. I think it's hard for Garcia, for looking at that fight, it's hard for Garcia to look good in that fight. The zone propped him, to me, the zone prop Tago up just for this, just to give Garcia somebody, because Tago was not a guy that did anything. He was just had a good record, and he was just around. You know, he was in that WBO ranking, and he was just around. He hasn't really done anything, and it's like he was on the zone strictly for this, just to give Garcia a fight. And it's like the way Golden Boy is handling Garcia, I'm kind of angry, because it's like all these other guys are world champions, you know, trying to fight the best in the division, and this guy is just basically wasting time with guys that he shouldn't be. If he's trying to be compared to Tank Davis and Haney and all those guys are fighting for titles already, have been champions already, and they are fighting the top of the division. But he keep mentioning these guys, and he's not even fighting nobody comparable to these guys. And it's like, they just trying to milk Garcia as long as they can. Jojo Diaz, that's another, like, to me that's a meaningless fight, because Jojo Diaz is not a hard hitter, and I can't see any situation where he beats Garcia. He's not gonna get a decision. He's definitely not gonna stop him. So that's just, to me, that's just a waste of time. Get Garcia one of these top 10 guys. I mean, Jojo is a top 10 guy, but he's not a threat to Garcia. And the way they building him, it's like they trying to, you know, clout chase, but they really ain't trying to do anything as of right now. Maybe 2 or 3 years from now, they might be trying to do something. You know, he's got a good skill set, good offensive fighter. His defense could be is still questioned. I think that's probably one of the reasons why they not really stepping him up. But all this clout chasing and talking about Tank Davis and all that, they really not about that.
Yeah. The thing with Jojo Diaz too, I mean, I really did think that Garcia was going to fight Jojo Diaz. I know that, you know, there was some talk about Ryan Garcia fighting Isaac Cruz Gonzalez, but, you know, Isaac Cruz said there was no, you know, offer sent that way. I think his manager is Sean Gibbons, and they said, you know, no offer was sent his way, reference to a fight, you know, against Ryan Garcia. And, you know, now we got, you know, Isaac Cruz fighting Yordenis Gamboa on Saturday as I think that's the co-feature for Spence versus Ugas. But, you know, with Jojo Diaz, you know, I know that you were talking about all the other guys there, that the Devin Haney's, the Tank Davises, you know, even, you know, with Teofimo Lopez to a certain extent. I mean, and now you add George Kambosos, who is not the now unified champion, you know. You know, even going after someone like a Jojo Diaz, you know, that the problem with that is Devin Haney's already fought him. You know, that should have been Ryan Garcia should have fought Jojo Diaz instead of Devin Haney, but that didn't happen. And now it's like, you know, now you go up against a guy in Emmanuel Tago that, you know, did have his fight against Mason Menard, where he got the majority decision win, but that was like, you know, easily his biggest win, you know. So outside of that, you really don't have that much as far as like a notable win for Emmanuel Tago up to that particular point. So getting this win over Emmanuel Tago, yeah, okay, you get that win, but you know what else is out there? Real quick on the live chat, shout out to Jimbo. He says Ryan will probably go after WBA regular belt. But you know, the thing is, Tank Davis has that regular belt right now, and will, you know, of course, face Rolly Romero on Memorial Day weekend. So you know, I'm, you know, I'm trying to figure out like what other route that he has. You know, looking at top 10. You know, of course, you know, Teofimo is looking to move up. Of course, George Kambosos versus Devin Haney. You got Vasily Lomachenko out there. They should try to move to have Ryan Garcia face Vasily Lomachenko, since you got the 2-fight deal with Devin Haney and George Kambosos. Why not try to have Ryan Garcia take on Vasily Lomachenko? I know that, you know, Top Rank may be trying to still hold on to Lomachenko to see if he could get the winner of Haney versus Kambosos, since they're all part of that little deal with Top Rank. But I would think that Lomachenko is probably going on the back end of his career, and you want to try to catch him before any of these other fighters do. So why not say, hey, you know what? I'm Ryan Garcia. I got so much confidence. I'm back. I'm all the way back. I want to make that move. I want to take that risk. I want to go after Vasily Lomachenko, and I want to be to the point where I want to be so impressive that I stop Vasily Lomachenko. Now, if he's able to get the fight against Lomachenko and stop him, that makes his, stock rise so high that it pretty much has him probably above those guys at the 135-pound division, which includes Tank Davis, which includes Devin Haney, which includes George Kambosos Jr. So, outside of that, you really don't have that many other options. We talked about Jojo Diaz. You got Richard Comey, who lost to Vasily Lomachenko. You got Javier Fortuna, who lost to Jojo Diaz, right? Williams Zepeda is, they're over in Top Rank, so it almost looks like they're holding on to Williams Zepeda to a certain extent, So, I mean, I don't know, like, who else out there that Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy or whatever it is could try to get Ryan Garcia to go after.
Yeah, they trying to get one of them. I don't know if they're going the vacant belt route, but even if Tank is beating on guys that are considered bums, like Romy Romero is better than Tago.
Yep.
Like, even if you want to take it that route, like Garcia is taking steps backwards. Like Luke Campbell is not great, but after you beat Luke Campbell in that type of fight, don't take a step back. It's like you just eyeing time. You just wasting time to try to figure out what's your route, because that's what it looks like. It looks like they just trying to buy time to try to figure out, maybe like the guy in the chat said, try to grab one of these belts, because it's going to be difficult to do that anyway. But it just seems like they're trying to buy time, and he's never really fought recently, other than Luke Campbell, a real lightweight. It's like, if you looked at the fight last night with Tago, like Tago looked like he was a featherweight. They didn't even look like they were in the same weight class.
Yeah.
If he gets in there with Jojo Diaz, it's probably going to look like the same thing, because Jojo is legit a 126, and if you want to go further than that, he might be a 130 guy. He's definitely not a legit lightweight. So it's like they're not even fighting legit guys at the weight. I don't understand it.
Yeah, the thing with Jojo Diaz, he was a former WBC featherweight title contender, did lose to Gary Russell Jr. He moved up to 130 pounds. He got like a belt at 130 pounds and ended up losing that 130-pound belt in the scales. So he moved up to 135, and like I said, he had his win there against Fortuna, I think it was, and ended up facing Devin Haney, for that WBC belt. And I think that fight between Jojo Diaz and Fortuna happened was because Ryan Garcia didn't end up facing Javier Fortuna, because I think at one point Ryan Garcia was one of those top contenders for the WBC title, but he didn't end up fighting Javier Fortuna for some strange reason at that particular point, and we had the whole thing with him with his suppression. So that fight kind of like went down by the wayside. But yeah, if Ryan Garcia ends up facing someone like a Jojo Diaz, that's pretty much like a step down. You got to figure out how to get him to be on the way up, And while there are a good amount of fighters that are out there at the lightweight division, there aren't that many there that are under Golden Boy Promotions. There are a few fighters there that are under Heyman Boxing, but we gotta see. I don't think that Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions will work with Heyman Boxing unless if it's going to be that fight between Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. So I really don't know what is the next direction there for Ryan Garcia. And it's going to be very strange because, like I said, they want to make him be very active this year. Of course, You got this fight in April. I guess they want to see if they can turn around and have him fight in July or August or something like that, and then have him fight one more time. So if they want to have him do that, cool, go right ahead. But hopefully you have opponents that are out there that would make people say, hey, okay, Ryan Garcia is facing this guy. This should be something to see, okay, where he's going to be at this particular point of his professional career. And, like you were saying there, right? Like Tego, I don't think people would view Tego at the same level as a Rolly Romero, man. At least Rolly Romero had some version of a world title. He had the interim WBA lightweight title, so WBA just wanted to consolidate those belts. So they removed the interim titles from those who held it, and they ended up being the top contenders for the fighters that hold the WBA regular championship. So that's why you got Tank Davis there against Rolly Romero in Memorial Day weekend. So we got to see like how this lightweight division is going to sort itself out here over the next few months. We had this fight. We got Tank Davis against Rolly Romero. You got the fights with Devin Haney and George Kambosos Jr. You got to see what's happening with Vasily Lomachenko and a few of these other guys here in the lightweight division. Like I said, you still got Isaac Cruz Gonzalez, who is facing Yordenis Gamboa, but if he gets through that particular fight with the win, he's still out there as one of those top guys there in the lightweight division. So a good amount of fights that could be in the near future to sort itself out. And I'll say it's almost like last year at 135, where you had a good amount of fighters in the top 10 that did fight each other last year. And I think we're going to have a similar thing this year for that lightweight division. So we'll see how that sorts itself out. Next up in that card, wanted to get to this particular bout because this bout kind of like gave us probably the performance of the evening or the performance of the night. Shane Mosley Jr. Going up against Gabriel Rosado at the super middleweight division. Of course, Gabe Rosado had his fight at middleweight beforehand there where, he faced the guy that seems to be very reluctant to fight for a world title at middleweight in Jaime Munguia. He lost by unanimous decision there to Jaime Munguia. But before that, he had that upset, one of the upsets of the year against the bully Bekmatier Makluziev with that third round knockout. And that was at, super middleweight. And then he goes down to middleweight to face Jaime Munguia and then comes back up to super middleweight to face Shane Mosley Jr., who was there at 17 wins and 4 losses. And he had, his last fight was a majority decision loss to Jason Quigley. And that was at middleweight. And here in super middleweight, he has probably one of the better performances of the night. He just looked like he was in control the entire fight. There wasn't really much that Gabe Rosado could do in this particular instance. He wanted to, force Shane Mosley into like a slugfest or a firefight. And Shane Mosley, even though he scored some good punches, some big punches on Gabe Rosado, he didn't really try to be rushed into, trying to get back into it where Gabe Rosado could have caught him with a counter punch. And he just kept his distance the entire fight, really outworked Gabe Rosado. And he should have got a clear victory, but it ended up being a majority decision win for Shane Mosley Jr. For some reason, Judge Angel Mendez Ramos scored about 95-95, 5 rounds each for both fighters. Man, I don't know what that is, man. I don't know what that is. One judge scored at 97-93 and another scored at 98-92 there for Shane Mosley Jr., man. And, that kind of like, says that, hey, I mean, maybe he could, try to get himself back into some things here and try to get some momentum. Maybe he'll stick there in the super middleweight division there, for a little bit. He's kind of like bounce back and forth with middleweight and super middleweight. But if he feels very comfortable there in the super middleweight division, then maybe he could get himself into having a couple more fights there at super middleweight, and then we'll see what happens with them later on down the line. But that's what I got off of that, man. Any comments on Shane Mosley Jr.'s performance? I don't know, man. Looks like nobody really Yo, what's up?
Yeah, I got a comment. So I actually I didn't have anything nice to say about the Ryan Garcia, so that's why I didn't really say much on that one. I think World Rank pretty much said it's self-explanatory on that fight. Like, when are we gonna see him fight somebody that actually has a chance to win? All right, on to the fight of the night. Shane Mosley definitely is improving. Every time I see him, even the contender, he was always getting better. I think that there were a lot of things that I saw him do. Like, you could see him working on moves that he worked on in practice. And they actually working and stuff. And, he doing things like slipping and countering, just little small stuff where he looked like a champion-ish fighter, like, obviously he can't beat the A-level fighters, but he sort of reminded me of a Badu Jack, not in Badu Jack's skill. I mean, that remains to be seen. But you remember Badu Jack, when he first started, was like kind of shaky when he was fighting people. And then at some point, Badu Jack made sure that his win, as well as his skill set, kind of drowned people. And he separated himself. Badu Jack, for a number of years, when he was like in his prime-ish, he separated himself from people. And then them first few years, people were skeptical and like wondering, like what is he gonna be? So I see him sort of coming on, and you can definitely tell he's learning. I think that looking at them odds, I probably would have never picked Shane Mosley. Like, I don't think I would have. Like, just seeing the odds, I wouldn't have predicted that one. But Gabe Rosado is on his way down. He's on the decline, and Shane Mosley obviously is improving, and Shane Mosley probably spars with pretty good guys, and obviously he got the skill set from his dad to sort of impart the boxing knowledge. And his defense looked a lot better than what it normally does. He got hit with a couple like loose shots, but he didn't get hit with as many clean, just loose shots. So yeah, I was very proud of him. You could tell he was happy for himself, just in that him always being the underdog and just upsetting people. So shout out to Shane Mosley. This is an example when hard work prevails.
Yeah. I mean, he's had, outside of the fight with Brandon Adams, where he, kind of like clearly lost that one. The two other decision losses were very close or pretty close losses, so it's not like, he had been completely out of a fight except for, maybe that one. So, he's looking like he's polishing himself as a pretty good fighter. Like I said, he doesn't really get caught in no traps, or he didn't get caught in the traps there with Gabe Rosado. And he's, working on developing himself as a, more complete fighter and a very patient fighter too, so, kind of like looking at, where he could, get some movement or some traction there in the super middleweight division. And, like you said, maybe like a Badu Jack, where you kind of like see him improving more and more as he gets more fights in. And then, we just got to see where they could position him at this particular point of his career, where he could set himself up to, try to get fights with a lot of these other guys there in the super middleweight division. Actually, if they really are kind of like, really invested in him and trying to do some things, then maybe they could have him be in there against, former IBO champion there, Carlos Gongora, Carlos Congora has been on a couple of fight cards that have been on the zone. But his last particular fight, he did lose a split decision to Lerone Richards, and I'm not sure if they're going to have a rematch there between Congora and Richards. But if not, then maybe they could say, hey, Shane Mosley, maybe you could go up against someone like a Carlos Congora, before he gets in the mix as far as like those guys there in the super middleweight division. I know that Demetrius Andrade is about to enter himself in 168 pounds, going up against Zach Parker. And that's going to be a WBO final eliminator bout. Of course, you have the undisputed champion in Canelo Alvarez and a few other guys that are out there at super middleweight. But there with Shane Mosley, he has to see where he's going to be at this particular juncture in the super middleweight division. And I think a fight against someone like a Carlos Congora might be where he could measure himself a little bit more.
I don't want to be disrespectful, but I feel as though this fight, and I agree with a lot of sentiment that you guys made in terms of Mosley Jr. progressing and learning his craft and getting better, because he looked competent as a boxer yesterday. So I don't want to downplay that he's improving. But I think this fight tells me more about Rosado and what Rosado didn't do. And it just seemed like he didn't really put in the effort to want to win. Like, it just seemed like I don't think he was trying to pick up a check, but I think this shows more about Rosado. And if we take away the Bully Beck knockout, he hasn't really done much recently. And this is more of who Rosado is as opposed to Mosley, more so Mosley. Because I don't know how Mosley's going to handle the big dogs at 168 or anybody relevant at 168. Even Gongora, I think, is too high of a step. Again, he is improving, but I just think this was more so of Rosado not being motivated or I don't know what it is. I know he's getting up there in age, and Rosado's made a lot of money. He's had a lot of good fights, and he's been relevant in the sport for a long time. But I will never forgive him for one thing that he has not done in his career, and that's be a world champion. And he had the opportunity at 54. I'll never let this go. He had the opportunity at 54 to fight Cornelius Bundra's K9. And he gave it up to fight Triple G. I will never forgive him for that, because he could have became a world champion, but he chased money and he never got a real A-side opportunity to be champion once he gave that up. Respect to his career, because like you guys said, he's on the downside, but I don't think he really put a performance in yesterday. And this speaks to me more about Rosado than Mosley moving up in 168.
The only thing I will...
No, go ahead.
The only thing I'll push back on you, I definitely think it does speak on Rosado in that, like, maybe he didn't want it, maybe he didn't want to go to that place. But if you looked at the exchanges, he didn't have a lot for what Shane Mosley was doing, which was Shane Mosley's jab, which he's always been susceptible to someone jabbing him. And Shane Mosley just was jabbing yesterday. He was jabbing, like when he finished his combos and stuff, he would end with the jab. I think I saw Shane Mosley do, like, he controlled the head. You know how in the Tony Harrison fight, where Tony Harrison would punch, then he would leave his glove out and sort of push the dude's neck to control his head. Sort of like how Andre Ward and Floyd Mayweather do. You know, everybody do that move. Like, if you're a competent high-level boxer, you do that move. He was doing little stuff like that. I think it's both of them. And I think to not say that it's also him learning, because I watched literally all his fights in terms of the Contender and then all his fights as a professional. He's improving. He's definitely improving. Like, even his confidence, even the way his ring presence, the way that he was fighting such that you look at the fight and be like, dang, he's controlling this fight. Like he had the demeanor of actually winning as well. He tried to do that crap against other people and he don't be winning. But in this fight, he was actually landing shots and, you know, had the demeanor of the better looking fighter, you know. Yeah, I think it's, you know, I get what you're saying. You ain't trying to be disrespectful to him, but I think it's a bit of a discredit to what he has done and how much he's improving. How will he do against the top people? He'll probably do what he's always done, unless something changes, which is against the A-level fighters, B+, B-, maybe even the B fighters. The A-level fighters, he gonna lose. The B fighters, the B- and stuff, he may have a fight.
Uh-oh. Looks like he hadn't gotten to that zone.
The only thing I wanted to tell back on what he was saying basically, like, I would give Mosley a pass and just see how he shows up in his next fight. Is he gonna be as composed and is his style gonna stick the same when he's more in a tough time? So I would say Mosley definitely has improved, but I want to give him another fight against a similar competition to be able to say that, to give him more credit as opposed to Rosado, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Now, going into,
can I say one thing in rebuttal to that, James?
All right, go ahead.
Not to rebuttal, but to like add a point. I think that style also is what also made him look better, because if he fights like a slick, throw a bunch of punches type style, he gonna have a lot of trouble with that style, in my opinion. But the counter puncher, like what's the name, wanted to counter punch him, and all he literally had to do was lead with shots and then make sure he just got out the way. He'll beat that style all day. I think it was the style as well that was advantageous to him.
Word. Now, I was going to say the thing with Gabe Rosado, the world ranks point. How Gabe Rosado performed in this one might, be more disappointing in comparison to, I guess, his effort against Jaime Munguia. But I'm going to point to his performance against Daniel Jacobs, because in that particular fight, like he looked like he fought a great fight against Daniel Jacobs. They just, the judges didn't give him, the favorable decision in that particular fight. And, he looked like he was, very fluent in his punches. He was, moving around the ring very well against Daniel Jacobs, and, didn't really get caught that much against Jacobs in that particular fight. And in that particular performance, he just looked a lot better than, he did here against Shane Mosley Jr., where it just looked like he almost looked like he forgot everything that he did there in that fight against Daniel Jacobs. So, from a visual standpoint, as far as like effort, maybe, you kind of like see that there, but with him having, 15, I think it's like 15 losses or something like that, pretty much could say that that's pretty much a wrap for, Gabe Rosado in this particular instance. But, for Shane Mosley Jr., I think, with him being at super middleweight, I know that I mentioned Carlos Gongora, but maybe another one if this fighter isn't locked in to face somebody late this year, and that's John Ryder. John Ryder had his win over Daniel Jacobs earlier this year. It was pretty much for him like a big win. So maybe he could go ahead and try to see about having a fight here against Shane Mosley Jr. But like I said, if he is a potential opponent for Saul Canelo Alvarez, then I don't really see John Ryder having a fight there against Shane Mosley Jr. So that's pretty much that. The other thing, real quick, before I go into the preview and pretty much prediction there for next week's main event. You did, have one fight there for it was like a unification bout of sorts in the flyweight division for women, women's flyweight, WBC and WBA flyweight title was Marlon Esparza versus Naoko Fujioka, and that was pretty much like a action filled fight. A lot of punches were thrown, particularly by Fujioka. It looked like Marlon Esparza was trying to be more the boxer in this particular sense, but it looked like she was getting caught a good amount of times in that fight. And it did go to full 10 rounds and whatnot. And the judges' scorecards, I thought it was pretty close bout. There were a good amount of rounds that could have been scored either way or something like that. But I thought that Fujioka really made a real effort in this particular bout. But for some reason, two of the judges gave every single round to Marlon Esparza, and Esparza is like the now unified champion. But I thought it was crazy because I didn't really know until that fight happened that Fujioka is 46 years old, but she was throwing all them punches at 46 years old. I'm like, God damn, yo, what's going on? Yeah, but I mean, she should have deserved better than that. To not have any of those rounds be scored in her favor. I think that I got to check this thing on a Twitter timeline. I think they said that two of the three judges that were there were, I guess, within that area or something like that. Yeah, they're from the home state, So I just thought that was crazy there, but Marlon Esparza, unifies there in the flyweight division, and she is, I guess she's gonna have one fight coming up because I think this was to kind of like see if Esparza is going to have another fight against was it Sneesia Estrada, who she lost to back in 2019, so it'd be like a rematch of sorts. And Sneesia Estrada is like I think one of the more exciting fighters there at that flyweight division there at 22-0, and has the she has had multiple world titles in multiple divisions, so they might just have one other fight here where they'll have a rematch there in the flyweight division. So that looks like that's going to be a fight there later on down the line. But yeah, Marlon Esparza there getting that win over Fujioka. But I thought that was a crazy bout too, man. That one had a lot of action, man. I wasn't expecting that, but it was a pretty good little action bout there that they had. So there was that. Now just getting into this thing here, man. All right, it's officially fight week for this big bout, welterweight division. Errol Spence Jr., WBC and IBF welterweight champion. Yordenis Ugas, WBA welterweight champion. Unification bout. A whole lot on the line in this one. Yordenis Ugas coming off that win over Manny Pacquiao, where could have been Errol Spence Jr., but Errol Spence had suffered the eye injury that took him out of that bout. For those that kind of like was following what was going down last year, like it would have been Errol Spence versus Yordenis Ugas last year, but Manny Pacquiao said that hey, he wants to get back in for one more fight, and so once that happened, then they tried to set up Spence versus Pacquiao, which that was going to be the plan, but didn't necessarily happen that way. So now we got Spence versus Ugas. This is, yet another opportunity for Yordenis Ugas to prove himself here in the welterweight division. Of course, he had his close bout against Sean Porter. Some people thought that he beat Sean Porter, but he ended up falling short there. But like I said, he had that night in the spotlight last year against Manny Pacquiao. Was able to score the decision win over Manny Pacquiao. Was the last bout of Manny Pacquiao's career. So Yordenis Ugas pretty much earned that WBA title. And Now it's just a matter of seeing what he's going to do here against Errol Spence Jr., undefeated unified welterweight champion, and is going to be in the hometown of Errol Spence Jr. in AT&T Stadium. Man, it's going to be a big event, big fight. Looking forward to it. Going out there. But I'm seeing here. What do y'all see in this particular bout coming up between Spence and Ugas? World rank. You could go ahead first.
So this a huge fight in terms of Ugas' career. So I equate it to a rapper, a new up and coming rapper making a hot song and setting the hood on fire with his first single. The second single may not do as well, but the third single, well, this is more so back in the day. The third single that came out, that's the one that can make or break if you a one-hit wonder or you got substance going forward about your music. And in this case, this is how I feel about Ugas, because the Pacquiao fight is always going to be his defining fight, but this fight is just as important in terms of how people will perceive him. And is he just going to be considered somebody who beat an old Pacquiao, or is he going to be somebody who really has substance to his career? So he can make that happen in this fight. I think the style, I'm not totally sure of the style matchup, because I think it can be a ugly style match. And I'm not sure of how the styles are going to come together and mesh, but I think it's going to be a fairly close fight. But I think it can be any outcome from Spence wide decision to Ugas a close decision. I think it goes a decision, and I'm not too sure how the styles are going to mesh though.
I mean, I'm very interested to see how the styles are going to mesh, and I've been saying this for a while. Was that I think it's going to be a matchup of the two trainers that are two of the better trainers in the sport of boxing, and and Ismail Salas there and Derek James. Now the thing with Errol Spence is he tries to impose his aggression, controlled aggression, and controlled pace there against his fighters. He's going to be there against Yordenis Ugas. Ugas is their orthodox. Of course, Spence is a southpaw, so it'll be another southpaw that Yordenis Ugas is going to have to deal with. But this time, it's going to be someone that has a longer reach, someone that is very consistent with his work and his approach with his jab and following up that jab with the left hand. So we got to see how Yordenis Ugas goes at it. Like Boxing Academic said in the last podcast, it could potentially end up being an exciting fight, or it could just be like y'all were saying, a tactical battle. With Yordenis Ugas, he's more of like a counter puncher, someone that fights off his back foot. So will he be able to gauge what Errol Spence is gonna do and try to work off that and then try to have good foot position, try to figure out where he's going to be at, and then try to get some counter punches in to move out the way. Those that have watched the thing there with the All Access, or what it is, special with Spence Ugas, the last one that they had that came out earlier today. They had Ismail Salas, and Ismail Salas was doing some scouting. He was watching videos of Errol Spence, and he was talking about trying to see or look at the patterns of Errol Spence, where he moves, where he throws his punches, where he expects to land those punches, and say, hey, if we expect Errol Spence to do this, then this is what we got to do in order to get away from that, and then try to counter that, or try to maneuver in a certain path that Errol Spence doesn't have that much success there against Yordenis Ugas. So they've been watching film, and they've been studying Errol Spence in his fights against like Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, among others. But like you said, they're world ranked. This is the third single or the third album of a rapper to see where he establishes himself in the game. Of course, Ugas had, a couple early losses, had that close loss to Sean Porter, but, has, kind of like worked his way back, and he had that, defining win over Manny Pacquiao, where it's like, wow, okay, he beat Manny Pacquiao, even with, Manny Pacquiao being where he was at, he still beat Manny Pacquiao. I mean, the thing about it is, Keith Thurman didn't get a win over Manny Pacquiao, but Yordenis Ugas got a win over Manny Pacquiao. So now it's like, what is he going to do here against Errol Spence, who was considered by some as a top 5 or outside of the top 5 pound for pound fighters, someone who could be rated as the top rated welterweight. Well, it can't be no lower than 2, of course, but still, he's like, as he says, he's the big fish in the welterweight division, and we just got to see how he is here at this particular point of his career. I mean, only people around his camp, know where he's at this particular juncture, even with his eye injury. So we'll see how that happens with him here in this fight against Yordenis Ugas. Boxing Academic, got any additional thoughts here for this fight?
No, I think my comments last week are pretty much still generally my thoughts. It depends on how the fight will go, how Errol Spence decides to take the fight. If he decides to, go forward and use his sort of bullying style, we'll get a more exciting fight, because then Ugas will trade and sort of try to counter him, and he'll counter the counter. But then on the opposite one, if he decides to just, back up, use his jab, and sort of make Ugas come forward, it's going to be more of a boring fight, but I think it'll be a more straightforward fight. It'll be a straightforward, a difference in style, similarly to how Detroit guy did, similar to how it's not going to be that drastic, but if Errol Spence backs up and uses his jab and makes Ugas come forward, Ugas going to be in a totally different world. He going to probably do things to leave himself open, but it's going to either be boring or he going to exert himself and he going to get hurt. So I will say, I got a question. If Errol Spence wins, does the conversation whether or not he number 1, does that get ended, or that's going to always be a conversation just because Terrence Crawford is in the division?
For some, it'll be still a discussion with Terrence Crawford still in the division, but it really shouldn't be much of a discussion, because you have Errol Spence, who defeated Sean Porter, who defeated Danny Garcia, and then, he would have this win over Yordenis Ugas. Those 3 are pretty much 3 of the top 5 or 6 guys in the welterweight division. And he defeated Sean Porter, a couple of years before Terrence Crawford defeated Sean Porter. And that win by Crawford last November is like the biggest win that Terrence Crawford has in the welterweight division, so there really shouldn't be that much of a discussion. It's just that, when you have someone that has had, titles at 135, was an undisputed champion at 140 pounds, and then comes up to 147 and, gets the world title and, is considered as one of the top rated pound for pound fighters in the sport, then, they kind of like will say, hey, we feel like this guy is the number 1 welterweight, even though, to a certain extent, he hadn't really proven that up to the point of facing Sean Porter. And Sean Porter was a guy that was, highly regarded as the top 5 welterweight. So with him, getting that win over the top 5 welterweight and being the guy that stopped Sean Porter, then, that kind of like says that, hey, maybe he's one of the top guys. But, you have, Crawford with that win over Sean Porter. You had Yordenis Ugas with that win over Manny Pacquiao. So we have our top guys. And that pretty much will say, okay, now we know that you'll clean out the division. But in a sense with Errol Spence Jr., it's like he's faced Danny Garcia, he's faced Sean Porter in one, um, and he'll face who is probably regarded as the third ranked welterweight in the world in Yordenis Ugas. If he gets the win over Yordenis Ugas, I'm like, how can you not put him at number one? You know, you got to have him as number one. It shouldn't really be that much of a discussion, but you may still have a couple of others that'll say, hey, I feel like Terrence Crawford is the number one welterweight when he hasn't had the type of resume that Errol Spence Jr. has at 147 pounds.
I agree. What you think, World Rank?
It's the old resume against eye test thing. That's what it comes down to. You know, some people value eye tests. You know, there's some people, most people value, or probably, I think people should value resume more because it actually shows what you actually did, not what you're capable of doing. But I won't argue with anyone to make the case that you know, the eye test say Crawford the best welterweight. I won't agree with him, but I won't argue with him.
I mean, you know, for that discussion, like I was saying, you have, I think it's Ring Magazine, right? Ring Magazine has Terrence Crawford rated over Errol Spence in the welterweight rankings there. So you do have that. I'm going to see here. There's like a, you know, Transnational Boxing Rankings Board, you know, does those type of rankings as well. You know, I want to see if they, you know, also have Terrence Crawford above Errol Spence. But nope, they got Errol Spence, you know, over Terrence Crawford. So it's kind of like interchangeable, you know, when it comes to, you know, some of these things. So, like I said, though, if Errol Spence does get this win over Yordenis Ugas, you know, he should be regarded as the top-rated welterweight there, and should be, you know, not like I said, it shouldn't be that much of a debate. But you know, like I said, I mean, if you got guys that you know still want to put in, you know, Terrence Crawford as the top-rated welterweight, then you know they're going to put Terrence Crawford as the top-rated welterweight until you know I guess they end up facing each other, you know. But you know, hopefully we will see that particular bout here at the end of this year if Errol Spence Jr. has this win over Yordenis Ugas. You know, Yordenis Ugas is very vocal about, you know, an undisputed welterweight champion being crowned by the end of this year. You really haven't seen Errol Spence really mention it, you know, even though people are trying to pry it out of him. You know, they had the discussion there with Brian Custer last week. You know, he says, you know, eventually it's going to happen. But, you know, they're just trying to stay patient, trying to, you know, stick with the plan, so to speak. He still has, you know, a task ahead of him against Yordenis Ugas, and he wants to focus on that task first before seeing about making that move towards making a fight with Terrence Crawford for the undisputed welterweight championship. So that's what you know is on slate coming up. But like I said, you know, looking forward to that fight and looking forward to that card there at AT&T Stadium in Dallas. You know, I'll be in the house for that fight card. It's gonna start early. I think it's around 7 p.m. Eastern time is when the first fights are gonna go down. Man, that's gonna be a long day. You know, so but I'll see how things are out there in at AT&T Stadium there, man. So there's that, you know. But that's pretty much what I got. World Rank, you got something else?
Yeah, I was about to ask, did Boxing Twitter do their do the thing where they brought the suite? Did they go about doing that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yep, they got the thing there. Sweet sold out. He got the tickets. He's arranging the stuff to distribute the tickets and you know, wherever they're gonna meet up at in order to get the tickets distributed and stuff like that. So yeah, that's all good and going.
Shout out to Lefty for putting that together, man. I thought that was a brilliant idea doing that, putting that together.
Yeah, man. I mean, we just, came up with the idea and just said, screw it. Let's see who'll jump onto it. And, I guess what he said, I think it was like the first day he mentioned it, he said about three people said they were down for it and just, went for it, right then and there. And so, we just said, hey, why not? Let's go for it. And, he pretty much had, it almost was filled up, before his initial deadline, but then he got enough people to where, he'll have everybody they need in order to fill out the suite. So that's all good. A shout out to on the live chat Sporting Advantage. He says that Ugas is probably the most dangerous fight outside of Spence versus Crawford. Whoever wins 147 is never weak. Yeah. 147-pound division has been, a glamour division of sorts. But in 2022, you have the opportunity of having, an undisputed welterweight champion, a 4-belt undisputed welterweight champion. You had, in a sense, a 3-belt undisputed champion in Zab Judah. He was the last one to be undisputed champion. We had initial fight against Corey Spinks, ended up losing that in the close bout. Then he had a rematch against Corey Spinks in Corey Spinks' hometown, ended up stopping Corey Spinks. And he got that undisputed title, and like he was saying a few days ago, man, when he got the belt, it just felt like he was getting a whole bag of Skittles, with all the belts, all the different color belts coming in. And that was like a great feeling for him there to be undisputed champ, but we haven't really had that type of thing there in a 4-belt era. Of course we had big fights. You've had, of course, Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, which had 3 of the 4 major belts on the line. But even after that, Floyd Mayweather said, "Man, I ain't keeping the WBO belt." So you've had the belts be fragmented for all this time since 2015 or whatever it is, and now we are really close to having a 4-belt undisputed champion at 147 pounds, and there with Errol Spence, with the fights that he's had against the Sean Porters, the Danny Garcias, I know Mikey Garcia's is something there, the Kell Brooks, and now Yordenis Ugas. And then it could, if he gets the win over Yordenis Ugas, it could culminate with an undisputed title fight against Terrence Crawford. And that could be, one of the biggest fights out there. It's going to be one of the more anticipated fights in the sport of boxing, and almost, gives the vibes of, like a Hagler, Hearns, or Sugar Ray Leonard versus Hearns, or like how they had the Fab Four, with that Fab Four that happened around that time back then in the 80s. So gotta gives those vibes there, but we got to see what happens coming up on April 16th. Errol Spence Jr., Yordenis Ugas for the WBC, WBA, and IBF welterweight titles, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas there. So looking forward to that. But, with that being said there, trying to pretty much cover most of everything that wanted to do here in this particular episode. I thank the Boxing Academic and World Rank for joining us here in this live discussion. For those, watching live, I thank you all for watching live. But we'll also have this thing available on replay through iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and it'll also be on the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We really appreciate it there. But on that note, that's pretty much what I got for this particular episode of the Boxing Source Radio Show. And like I said, at the end of every show, folks, point of boxing is a hit and not get hit, not to stand and trade. On that note, folks, I'm out. Have a good evening, everybody.
Peace.